It is 7 o'clock, the last panel of the day. So, firstly, technology and cannabis. This is a huge industry, and technology is a very wide topic. So, obviously, this is something we could probably do a whole conference about. But I'm very honored to have esteemed guests, two from Canada and two from Poland. So we'll have international thought leaders plus perspectives from, dare I say, young, hot, up-and-coming startups in this industry. So I'm very excited for this panel. I'm going to start by maybe getting everybody just to introduce themselves. I'm sure the audience will have idea of who people are, but maybe just a very quick intro, maybe going clockwise from my screen, maybe starting with you, Tom.
Oh, great. Thanks, Andrew. So welcome, everyone. Really glad to be here taking part today, particularly because despite being a Canadian citizen, I'm also a Polish citizen and my parents are Polish. So it's nice to be able to present here. So my background, I'm a chartered chemist, articling agrologist, classically trained environmental scientist. 6 years ago, I made the move from the environmental science sector into the medical cannabis and now the full federal legalization here in Canada. I've been fortunate to be part of many startups. The first one, I was a quality assurance person at Canna Farms, British Columbia's first licensed producer. Spent 3 years helping build that business. I was also an instructor at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, where we built one of the first university-level courses on cannabis production regulations. And now I started Nextleaf Labs with some team members where we offer extraction services to the legal cannabis industry here in Canada. So we don't grow, we purely process and provide those services on a B2B level. So very happy to be here talking to all of you.
Rafael, please, very quick introduction as well.
Hi all, I'm also very grateful to be here. And same as Tom, my both parents were Polish. I'm Polish, but apparently I'm not in Canada, I'm in Poland. I'm co-founder of Atlanta Loop. We are active in cannabis business for 3 years or so now. We are dealing with LED systems to enhance growth of plants indoors and in greenhouses. We are not dealing in anything that is outdoor. I have previous experience also in lighting industry since 2011, but it was in general lighting. Since 2016, I'm only active in horticulture market. We have realization in 3 continents, starting from South America in Uruguay, where both medical and recreational cannabis is legalized. But majority, our focus is major in this part of Europe, and it's usually Switzerland.
Rafael. Marcin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for having me here on this panel. My name is Marcin Malczak, and I'm CEO and co-founder of GreenCube Solution. My background with cannabis in general started in 2010 when I was working in Washington State around I-502 and advising some of the plantations there when actually working on my PhD that I did not yet finish. The research is done. I need to still work on the submission of the thesis. But I met a lot of people from the industry, and that's how it all picked up. And ultimately, right now we created a startup that is first artificial intelligence system for detection of male plants, and it works outdoor, so it works on any scalable land, as it uses actually drone imagery data and then sets of neural networks to actually first detect, but then also to manage your crop. So what we focus is on the individual plant to make them as healthy as possible, but also to bring the yield to max, cost to minimum. So to ensure that every farmer actually at the end of the season has both the quality and the money. So we want to help with the network as many people as we can with getting them on the grid and help this artificial intelligence to run actually all around the globe and learn more about the plants and help us all grow the highest quality standard product that we have. And right now, as our first year of operation, we are already the major seed producer as a private company here in this part of the Europe. We collaborate with over 14 farmers, and we actually right now have an operation in 3 countries and 2 continents. And we're already going to have for research institutions using our software in United States from the next year, and the commercial operation in California, Colorado, and most probably Washington State and Oregon area for sure for next year.
I realized I went clockwise, but really it should have been ladies first. So, Jazz, my apologies. Please, if maybe you could just wrap up the introductions.
Certainly, and thank you, Andrew, and to the organizers for having me, and to the people watching, thanks for waiting to the very end to catch our panel. So my name is Jaspreet. I'm from Canada, just like Tom, and I am a clinician by background, but I've always worked in the regulatory and clinical trial space. I've been involved in cannabis for just a little over 2 years now, focusing on claims verifications on the clinical side and working as a business development person, if you will, helping medical cannabis companies in North America as well as Europe and now into Asia really expand their options in terms of how to develop their organizations. Most recently, I founded a group with 2 amazing partners who were on previous panels on this conference. We are a global clinical research organization focusing on plant-based therapeutics, so really bridging the gap between bench science all the way to clinical trials to provide that actual claims verification for medical cannabis products. And grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. So going straight in, maybe it's great to have people from Canada, which I would, dare I say, is the most advanced market in cannabis with everything that's been going. In terms of technology and R&D, is there any kind of particular research on a meta level, Tom, which interests you, excites you? In Canada, anything that maybe we in Poland that are kind of a frontier market looking to develop can kind of learn from, and any advice that we can get from, let's say, the kind of market leaders in North America?
Yeah, so you know, I'll talk from the perspective of the cultivation and extraction side here in Canada. So, like you said, Canada arguably has the most advanced and mature federal cannabis market, both medical and adult use, recreational. We, just like anywhere in the world, research on this plant has been quite difficult up until recently, when Canada legalized cannabis about 2 years ago. For adult use purposes, it opened up a lot of possibilities, because now we have something called a research license. So as a business in this industry, you can have a processing license, cultivation, testing, and also research. That's what Nextleaf Labs has, in addition to a standard processing. And that allows you to play with cannabis in any which way, essentially, as long as you document all the processes. So people are looking at research from a genetics perspective, breeding new plants, either under nursery license or research license. They're looking at different extraction methods, which is what we're doing. We have the ability to play with cannabis and try different things on a different scale. And of course, the formulation side as well. So it is quite mature. What excites me most, obviously, getting to the extraction space is this concept of scale. And I think every jurisdiction goes through this, where you start off with a new system. It's very relatively small scale, artisanal almost in production. And as the product, as the industry in that jurisdiction evolves, and there's more cultivation, more growing, you have to have and invent new methods to tackle these problems. So what we've done here at Nextleaf, we're talking about extraction, is we looked at the limitations of off-the-shelf equipment for extraction. You know, prior to the last few years, we were talking about extraction in kilos, and now we're talking about tons. And our system can do about 100 to 200,000 kilos or 200 tons of metric tons a year. And really, there is no off-the-shelf system that can meet the existing regulations and the demands of the cannabis industry. So I think there's very much so low-hanging fruit when it comes to the extraction side of things. And it excites me that my company and other companies in the space have the ability to directly address these issues under a federal framework. And that's exciting, because that leads to innovation. We've had a number of federal grants awarded to the team to study this plant or analogs. And of course, we've had garnered over 40 patents internationally as well. So federal legalization gives you the ability to do that. And I think other people, other jurisdictions should be aware that things will get big fast, and you have to look ahead into this next phase of growth, which is not kilos, but tons of processing.
Just to maybe one question before I move on to the others. Do you see this innovation process at the start? Do you see that things are accelerating, and or do you think that things have already moved so fast over the last few years that it's going to plateau?
Oh no, I think this industry is ripe for innovation. I mean, we're heading from an industry that was clandestine in nature, where records weren't kept, where people were very open and sharing, and now we have publications and journals and grants and professors dedicated to this, and as well as private companies. So I think what my experience was in Canada was the initial few years of legalization for medical. It was just people trying to figure out the system and build companies that were trying to be profitable, and it very quickly went into something that was beyond small grow rooms and small extraction. So I think every jurisdiction is going to go through this. It's going to be a scramble to the starting line, and then you kind of get caught in this moment. And if you don't take a step back and see what's coming, you can get left behind, because as you're building your business, someone else is working on that next business or that next project, and you have to constantly innovate. So my advice to anyone in any other jurisdiction that's only looking at legalizing is, try to establish yourself, but also look forward and invest some time and money and resources into building something that's going to work for you 3 years down the road. And with that being said, also being flexible, because you have to be able to pivot as laws and regulations change.
So, Jas, moving over to you. Of course, this is a medical conference, and one of the issues we're having in Poland is lack of registered products, and the registration process is, let's say, a bit of a nightmare. There's huge complaints about it, and the way to really deal with this is to do proper clinical trials. Where is Canada at? What can you tell us about what you're up to in terms of the research and R&D, and what can we in Poland, what advice could you give us in Poland, where we're maybe, I don't know how many years behind? I'm going to ask that question to Marcin shortly, but what advice would you give us and to our audience here in Poland?
Certainly. It's a great question. And for the last 18 months, I would say that you could see the industry starting to develop. We came out of legalization, but when we focus on the medical side of things, the medical community was learning on the fly as well. But to educate our medical community was a large issue, because they were also unprepared for legalization. A very small percentage of the population was knowledgeable about the plant and how to use it, but we also had limited drug delivery methods. So it was either, it was really just flower is all you had access to through our 20 years, if you will, of existing legislation for medical access. So from a clinical trial perspective, they have been clinical trials. And as Tom mentioned, you do require a research license, but for clinical trials in humans, you do require a separate authorization, which was really only held by institutions, so major hospital groups, or that were attached to universities. So you had research physicians that could publish this and conduct these trials in a safe environment. With the licensed producers coming on the market, the medical community, instead of really getting more clinical guidance, it was a push to authorize as many patients as possible. And you do need the sales, do need to drive the industry forward, but there was that gap of the actual evidence that we were missing to show that these products actually work. And so when we formed this research organization, my partners and I are experienced clinical trialists for, combined experience of 40 years in the space, have taken drugs from development all the way to commercialization. And so we knew this was an opportunity to really interject ourselves, because a lot of the licensed producers were unable to put forth the funds, if you will, to formulate research groups and to contract the general public to actually do this. So we really see an opportunity here to work with different groups, so across the world. I would definitely say as advice is to engage your medical community right from the beginning, to provide them with the basic education. Physicians in Canada and even the US and the UK are not taught the endocannabinoid system in medical school. So it is very simple and basic neurological concepts that most neurologists, anesthesiologists, and chronic pain physicians can pick up on right away. But it's that basic level of understanding and comfort that's required to really get groups comfortable with actually providing access. So I would definitely say start with the education, build towards clinical trials, engage your compassionate care groups as well, to really form a more strategic effort to get this into the market. So that would be my response.
Unmute, Andrew.
Oh, can't hear you.
Using my own best practice and forgetting to unmute. Sorry about that. Yeah, lots to unpack there, and we'll go into that. But maybe just for the round two, Marcin, you're a man who is a data man. Maybe just talk us through how a collection of data can help in research and development in the cannabis industry, and tell us about some of the exciting things you're doing as a Polish startup that's making big moves internationally.
Yeah, actually, I think that data is a key, and we didn't yet start to see the change. I think, in a sense, as an industry, we are completely not ready. I mean, even as a human beings, we are not ready for the technology that is already here and that we have and we can use. Because and I'm CEO and a co-founder of a technological startup, right? That based on data. But even I wasn't aware of the tools that are available to us these days that we can actually utilize to grow hemp. Our fields last week were checked by 52 satellites with 32 different spectra to actually analyze over 30 indexes, starting from soil, water, nutrients, and all of that, and the topology, and what is around to find the microclimate and try to assess that. Then we go with the drones, right? And that gives you another possibility because you can fly and you can get basically pictures with any resolutions. With the level of detection that we have right now, on a large scale, we are detecting a single plant when it just has 2 leaves and is just right after sprouting. We can see males when they are between the bushes because they move. But to process all of that, you actually need a remarkable of talents, a team of remarkable talents and skills. But the data will bring us to a completely new environment, to something that we don't even comprehend that was possible a few years ago. Actually, when those guys that we work off, when they do a presentation to me, a kind of a CEO who comes from the biotechnology industry and then goes to that AI technology, I'm actually amazed that we have sci-fi right now in front of us. I mean, the AI marks and counts every single plant, detects the male plants, and then sends over to your phone the directions to the next plant that you need to pick up and to make sure that you didn't miss any, right? It measures every single plant. It calculates the overall biomass, the canopy, the indexes of health, and then tells you, depending on the nutrients distribution, where you actually had the best crop and the best conditions. And and all of that gives you a new level of control of how you manage, and even the use of pesticides and all of that. And we just started to learn. Previously, you had to go with the ruler and measure every single plant to actually know how the nutrients and experiment worked. Now you don't need that. You can run experiments on hundreds, thousands of acres, because anything you map and you put in the platform, and artificial intelligence learns, and those is a remarkable thing about those algorithms, that they are self-learning. So each new step, each new location, actually each problem that they detected, they can prevent and learn from the experience. So with what our technology around us brings us nowadays, which comes with drones, imagery data, with satellites, with soil mapping, and then combining all those beautiful tools that we created in the last decade with artificial intelligence, we go into the next level of the analysis, into the next level of data and researching the plant. And as I'm thinking, I'm actually, as I said, I'm really excited because you know, the team that we put behind, those were the guys who previously worked on the autonomous vehicles, and we have a ongoing joke that what is more cool than working on autonomous vehicles? It's working on autonomous vehicles that cultivate cannabis and hemp, right? That's
Doesn't
what
get
we
much
do.
cooler than that, no, for sure.
Yeah,
No, I
exactly.
think I would love to actually go to Tom and Jazz them about how they use data in terms of technology and R&D. But before so, I'd like to just go to Rafael. And Rafael, so you have a business which has been around for quite a while, but it's almost you discovered that your lighting solutions work really well for cannabis. I guess the question I have is, what are the advantages of having a business outside of cannabis and then finding this niche, and how you have developed this?
So we started with providing a light to plants like vegetables, cucumber, tomato, because majority of greenhouses grow just those two plants. But there is no other plant that can provide you so big yield if you provide more light. For example, if I gave you one lamp to grow tomato, you need 4 the same lamps of the same power to grow cannabis on the same space. Also, cannabis is a very grateful plant if you take care of it. You can put it indoors or greenhouse, monitor everything, and you can grow even 5 cycles a year indoors using Sea of Green technology. So you have a lot of small plants, and you can do like 5 pivots. Every cycle you can do a pivot and change something, and you see how it grows, how it changes. Thanks to chromatography, you can check the yield every time. If we once again switch to tomato in greenhouse grows like 11 months a year. So you cannot make any pivot during a year. So it takes a lot of time to find a good solution to grow tomato. And cannabis is very rapid. It's a very quick changing world. Also, we see that, as Marcin said, it's not because light is only one thing. We can alter the light, we can change wavelengths, we can use UV to enhance THC or immune system of a plant. That with only light we cannot influence, we cannot act as a god to the plant, because indoors we create the climate. We are a god to those plants. If you want to make sun, we switch on the light. If you want to make a night, we switch them off. But if we collect other data like CO2, humidity, vapor pressure deficit, etc., we can increase the yield. And if you take a plant that used to grow only outside and only for biomass, and indoors we want flowers, we don't want biomass. We can increase CBD, we can increase THC, we can literally create the plant.
Fantastic, exciting stuff. So, Tom, if I can maybe, if you've been utilizing data, say to maybe give us some case studies of maybe some of the patents which you've done and how you've developed this and how you're developing your extraction methods, and maybe if you give us a few case studies which you can share with our audience, that would be much appreciated.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll start with setting the stage this way. Whether we look at the different states in the U.S. And what the price of cannabis has come down to in places like Oregon or Washington that have overproduced in some respects, we've experienced the same thing here in Canada, where 5 years ago you could sell wholesale cannabis flowers for up to $5, $6, $7 a gram Canadian. Now flowers are going for $1 to $3 a gram. Biomass itself has gone down tremendously from 4-5 cents a milligram down to less than 1 now in the last few years, and the extracts have come through with that. So cannabis cultivation, particularly outside or in a greenhouse on this larger scale, where you typically don't see this premium level stuff as in a bunker style, is unfortunately agriculture, and there's a lot of price compression and commoditization there, and it's a race to the bottom. So you need data to inform your decisions in order to maximize the revenue or maximize the output. I'll give you one anecdote from my experience working at a cultivation facility for 3 years. I was the quality assurance manager. I dealt with data every day from lab testing and obviously inputs and outputs. Um, but in that scenario, we kind of stepped back and looked at what we were doing, and it was very kind of artistic how we were growing, and we stepped back and put into a scientific program where we really measured all the nutrients going in. We changed the lights, we changed the humidity and airflow, and with a few simple changes, with increasing lights, changing lights, and adding nutrients, we were able to triple the amount of cannabinoids that came out of a room with the same amount of people, same amount of energy, same amount of time and space. So that's one example where a little bit of data and a little bit of innovation, a little bit of evidence-based scientific approach to cultivation will get you those yields. On an extraction side, same thing. We're dealing with efficiencies here. The good old days are gone where in the first few years you can charge an arm and a leg for extracted cannabinoids. Now it is really competitive, and you have to work on efficiency, processing efficiency. So if you're able to process something down to a distillate and retain 70 or 80% of your initial cannabinoids after you've refined and purified, those extra few points on the extraction cycle could make or break your company. So obviously testing all your inputs, looking at filtration and seeing if there's any losses there. So that's what a lot of our innovation and IP has gone into, is maximizing the return and maximizing efficiency on extraction. And then, of course, there's innovative ways to look at the formulated products. For example, conventional THC or CBD extract in like an olive oil or sunflower oil or MCT oil is not super bioavailable. So if you can have creative ways using water soluble nanotechnology in order to increase the efficacy of a milligram of THC or CBD, you're again able to stretch that THC molecule, that milligram of THC, a long way, saving you and the consumer cost, because ultimately this cannabis legalization experiment will fail if the legal cannabis industry cannot compete with the black market that's unregulated. And we've seen that here. We've about 20% of the illegal or illicit market here in Canada captured after a few years. But the biggest thing that's driving the transition from the illicit to illicit market is not so much regulations and lab testing and packaging. It's price, right? If you can buy a vape pen for $20 off some illicit website versus 60 from a legal supplier, you're going to vote with your wallet. So ultimately, this whole industry needs to compete and outcompete the illicit industry. And you do that by making smart decisions, by using technology and driving your information and your decisions with data. And so that's what we've done, and that's what I hope everyone else does.
So just before I go to Jazz, Tom, you've been asked, in fact, there's a question about nanotech, and then Paul has asked you to tell us about your, so please.
Yeah, I saw a different question up there as well. So ultimately with nanotechnology, there's different ways to define it, but from the cannabis industry perspective, we're talking about making emulsions that are nano size or close to it, which are more readily absorbed by the body during ingestion. So when you typically ingest a cannabis oil, so again like an MCT oil formulated with cannabis, your metabolism plays a huge role, what you just ate, into absorption and the onset of effect. So some people might take 30 or 60 minutes or more to come on, and then that edible will last you 6 or 8 hours. Whereas with a nano emulsified oil or extract, you're able to decrease that onset time to less than 10 minutes, even 5 in some circumstances. And that effect only lasts an hour and a half, more so like a beer than kind of a whole day thing. So again, using data, whether that's the lab-based data, looking at droplet sizes, looking at different carrier oils, looking at different formulations and processes, all the way down to a research license here in Canada, allowing you to actually test people or do organoleptic assessments and see how the effects change with different formulations and different technologies. That's critical in order for you to remain competitive in this ever-evolving and competitive market.
Great. So, Jazz, again, data and then specifically with clinical trials. So obviously, cannabis is a tricky one because it affects different people in different ways, and the clinical trials are quite tricky. So, how perhaps you or the industry is using data to overcome some of these challenges?
Definitely. Thank you for that question. And really echoing a lot of what Tom said, that data does drive the ultimate outcome of particular formulations. And then for clinical trials, we use data to, one, determine what indications, so what areas of medicine or comorbidities we're looking to research. So how it actually interacts with the body based on for sleep, for anxiety, pain. Um, but we use data to also determine what are our starting study questions. So based off of the collection of data, or say observational data we've collected from platforms from patients who currently use medically accessed cannabis, we can determine if they have side effect profiles, what kind of dosing that they're comfortable with, the delivery mechanisms. We will use data to first drive how we design our clinical trials. What are the most important areas, or um, the areas that almost show a bit of a majority of interest to pursue first. And then when we actually do conduct the clinical trials, data is integral to a successful trial. So even if the results are positive or negative, you do need really great data to derive your statistical analyses to determine how efficacious the actual drug is. And as we move through clinical trials from phase 1 to phase 3, which determine whether or not a drug will actually go through regulators to become a pharmaceutical product, all of that data leads to that one critical moment. But for cannabis, we also find that data helps to drive the actual formulations or combinations of molecules that we use. So there's several different groups and platforms out there right now that are using computational methods to determine formulations, right down to bond structures, like how the actual molecules combine, and will they actually be bioavailable, but also be efficacious again in their use. So data is extremely important. It's something that, from our standpoint, we look at right from the plant. So exactly what Rafael is doing, all the way through, how it grows, where it grows, the quality of the soil, all of that can be quite important as we go through clinical trials to really determine the quality of the plant as we start to produce pharmaceuticals too. So extremely important in the clinical trial space as well.
Fantastic. So imagine we started the data conversation with you, and I guess we will move to the other key thing for in terms of technology and R&D, and that's money. So obviously, innovation is expensive on the whole. As a startup, and as a banker, maybe the question, obviously, technology research and development requires money. Money in the cannabis industry is tricky. So perhaps tell us how you are tackling this, or how on a meta level the industry dealing with this issue of requiring to develop and financing this.
Yeah, so actually, I've been a mentor and a trainer for a few startups, and basically most of my career I've been somewhere around academics, people who are just entrepreneurs. So the question of money always appears, and I mean, for me there are two aspects. First, whether you are really starting a company and you are at the early phase, or whether you are talking about a business that is present on the market and how to go from there. My view on when you really start is do as much as you can with your own money, because at the very early stage you will have a lot of vouchers and they will just try to rip you off. But if you have a product and you have something that is stable, and then you can show that it works and it is a product in the R&D department, you are better off. And a lot of academics thinks about the problem that comes scientifically, but they should address the problems that the market has. That's why I think that one of the main aspects for us is really to create a link between scientists and the industry, because we have so many great minds. You mentioned the bank, because I also aside from the artificial intelligence, biotechnology, I also have an experience working for one of the biggest Swiss banks in the quants area, translating what quants wrote in the terms of the models to then the IT. And not many people know that in Poland we actually have one of the greatest hubs of quants, because if Swiss people want to hand over the math and the calculation, they hand it over to Polish people. And we also have a lot of IT talents around here that we can actually, it sounds a little bit awful, but we can utilize cheaply. That's what the biggest corporations do, and we have this talent available. It's just a matter of networks. Instead of those bright people working for Philip Morris or companies that actually, or Monsanto, that do more harm than good, we can actually employ them and to work on that. Of course, we need funds, but I think with the good products and market availability, this is one thing that we need to think of. And anytime we think of the business, we need to think about the revenue. I actually, for example, deal in the case that in the newest startup, we are working with just private investors because we found that the most satisfactory in terms of the cash flow. Because with the venture capitals and other more complex deals, there was at some point a problem with the cash flow, and that the account was empty. And I've heard that from many startups, and that was the problem. Even they had an investment, it was not there when it was needed, because there was some negotiation going. So I would say, first thing, if you are a startup and think about money, think about the product, because if you generate the cash flow, you don't care about the investors. And if you have investors, wait with them until you have a good position to negotiate with them. And then I would go, if you can, go with the private investors. But I know a lot of people say there is so much money on the market. I would say they say it is, but to make actual deal, it takes a lot of people. So ask lawyers, ask for help from business strategies to actually idea that you have.
Rafa, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I'd like to go to Tom very quickly, because there seems to be the stuff that Marcin said has been really interesting, but you've been saying about the need to go fast, and if you don't, your competitors will. And there is, I guess, how do you bridge the gap as someone who's obviously, I'd love to hear about the grants which you got, but also about listing a company and all of this. How do you bridge the gap between going fast and maybe giving away too much equity in terms of technology and R&D, or bootstrapping, going a bit slower, having a bigger piece of the pie? Is it a case of there's no right or wrong answer here, and it's very specific on the situation? How would you, if you were mentoring, let's say, companies which are at an earlier stage of development with this, let's say, conundrum?
Yeah, it's there are a lot of external factors at play. So I'll give you a perspective here in Canada. What happened is, in 2013, the government announced that they're legalizing medical cannabis. They're going to start handing out licenses. It started somewhat of a green rush here, and it kind of continues to this day, but had a much smaller kind of degree than it was. So ultimately, what happened is, it was so early that banks were not lending, and they're still not lending to legal licensed cannabis companies. In fact, 6 years later, it's still extremely difficult to get a checking account opened at a bank if you're a cannabis company. In fact, we have vendors and engineers that refuse to work with anyone that touches cannabis, despite having multiple licenses federally, provincially, regionally, locally. So we are a legitimate business in the eyes of Health Canada and the CRA. And yet most banks don't even want to give you a debit card. So it can be very frustrating. And so as a result, what many companies did and continue to do is they went public. They raised money, private capital initially. Then they did a reverse takeover, an IPO, because that was really the only way to raise significant capital. And because of the high regulations here, there's a lot of costs that go into starting a business, anything from security to kind of pharmaceutical style design and manufacturing and finishes. So, and then there's also this issue of time. There are people that have been waiting 5 or 6 years to get a license. And so that's sometimes their own fault, sometimes the government fault, and a lot of bureaucracy. There's also consultants that you have to pay and lawyers. So long story short, you definitely need some capital, but you also need a lot more capital if you plan to go big. what a lot of companies did here is they got caught in this rat race where they raised money, they overpromised, but their valuations went up, so they promised more, they raised more money, and at some point, competition got too great, and now we have the largest companies in the world shutting down greenhouses because they went too fast, too quickly, didn't focus on quality, didn't focus on data. It was purely the square footage and pitch decks and how big you can go, and they got caught in a race. So what Marcin said is if you can, start reasonably small and finance yourself to a point, but it's inevitable that at some point you might be seeking investors. So choose your investors wisely, keep your finances tight, your corporate team small, and ultimately you have to make a right decision for your individual company. But it's much easier to grow bigger slowly, I think. Ultimately, it's more sustainable than to overpromise, underdeliver, and leave a lot of your shareholders in the water and holding the bags. And then there's just you get into a death spiral, which we've already seen about half dozen or more so companies this year alone in Canada have gone bankrupt or entered creditor protection. So there's no right or wrong choice, but you have to be smart. And that early money, like Marcin said, can be very toxic, and also that late money can also be very toxic. So you need to be as self-reliant as possible, but sometimes that's not possible.
I was joking that in this environment, actually, when it's changing so fast, you need more business analysts and the growers to actually be able to maneuver with your business plan and stay afloat.
Companies that end up pivoting 3, 4, 5 times, it starts off as a micro grow, turns into a large greenhouse, and all of a sudden they're saying they're going to start extraction. If there's one important lesson to be learned from Canada, is focus, remain focused, and there is no shame in starting smaller and working way up, because if you try to do everything, which most real businesses don't, they just specialize in one really, really niche thing and they do it right, you're setting yourself up for failure. So focus and discipline is extremely important, but also being able to pivot when you need to because of an uncertain regulatory framework.
Thank you, Rafael. Moving on to you. How are you managing your explosive growth?
Thinking about the startups, VCs, and etc., it always comes to money at some point. We decided to partner with a VC just after our first sale, because before our first sale, we are a very cheap company. If we don't sell, I can put everything in Excel in tables, but if I'm not able to sell, I'm worth nothing, like as a company. So we decided to use our every penny we spent as much as possible to get as much as we can from it. I started my company with my brothers, so we also decided not to pay ourselves for some time and to spend money to R&D, to a bunch of engineers to get a good product and to sell, because we started with lamps and it's hardware. It's quite hard to find a VC that will invest a lot of money in hardware, because you need a lot of engineers, production, warehouse, etc. You have to ship your product to other countries, which cost its logistics. It's far more problems than you do software, and everything is online. So as I said, we had a good product. Then we made sales, and after that we said, okay, we can find a VC to grow faster, because horticulture lighting market is booming right now. A few years ago, LEDs were used in universities, research institutions, and etc., because it was too expensive. Every year, LEDs are cheaper. There is more companies, so price has to drop. And previously, people were using HPSs. Within just few years, LEDs can provide you better yield, better quality of crops, and even big companies like Philips, if you enter their website, there are no HPS anymore. And they were one of the biggest manufacturers of those sodium lamps. So if big players, big boys, tends to switch from one technology to another, you know that there is no way back. So we decided to go with VC to grow faster and give some shares of our company to someone we at first don't know, because we thought that there is no time to wait. We have to be on other markets, because Poland is not the biggest market in terms of using artificial lighting, because cannabis is not legal to grow if you want to have THC more than 0.2, and it has to be sativa, not indica. So it's quite very limited. And now, in terms of horticulture market, majority of our sales is for cannabis industry. Last year, 80% of our profit was from abroad and from cannabis. This year, everything I have in our pipeline is abroad and is cannabis. Like maybe 2 to 3% will be tomato, cucumber in traditional greenhouses, but everything other is cannabis. So we want to grow fast, but we choose wisely the people we want to partnership, because it's always easy to say yes and marry someone, but getting divorced is nothing pleasant.
Yes, no, quite there. It just maybe tell us how you chose your VC, just very quickly before I move on to a different topic. Was it a local? Was it a VC specializing in cannabis, or was it a general VC? Because obviously you're a lighting company. How was that? Tell us a little bit about this process.
So we wanted to capitalize not only on money that we can get, because spending money is very easy. I can spend as much as I want on stupid things, but using it with your head, with your brain, and to get something at the end is quite tough, to be honest. So we wanted to partnership with someone with good network, someone from industry, because it will help us a lot if we get clients from someone who can connect us with bigger companies. So from the company that was not known from a small city in Poland, now we are selling, as I said, mainly abroad. We are active in 7 different countries. We have sales both in South America. We have sales in Israel when R&D, lighting, and everything connected with cannabis is really high. And also in Kazakhstan, where electricity is cheap, labor is cheap, land is cheap, and we managed to sell even in there. So we wanted someone with money, but also with a good network. And we waited to talk with different VCs to check if we are able to connect with each other well, if we understand each other, because they have my shares right now, and I cannot get rid of them. Yeah, they are here for good. At least for 5 years when they sell their shares.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even realize cannabis was a thing in Kazakhstan. So maybe offline, I'd love to hear more about that. But moving on, Jazz, is there any technology or any companies in the cannabis space which excite you? Is there any technology that you've seen where it's like, wow, that's cool, that's interesting, I'm definitely following this trend or this company or ideas?
For sure. So for us, the biggest thing that excites us is the development of different sorts of drug delivery methodologies. So we're looking beyond, in a clinical sense, we're looking beyond traditional flower, so dry flower smoking, or oils for drug delivery. So things like rapid melts or different forms of inhalers or vape pens. And what we're looking for is actually methods to get to standardized dosing. That's the most important thing for us. And there are a lot of groups that are trying to do this. And so we're eager to work with these groups to actually validate their findings in a clinical sense. So that's something that really excites us, because it's difficult to move forward without a standardized dosing. It's you need one, it's one without the other. And the other thing that really excites us is formulations, like actual ways to get solid formulations done. So it could be traditional scientists from a bench level, or it could be computational methodologies to develop these formulations. Those are areas of great interest. And internally as a company, we were capitalizing, if you will, and using COVID as a touch point to create a very virtual platform. We hope that at least 70% of our clinical trials can be done remotely using wearable technology and using really great platforms or data management centers that can help us actually capture and in real time give us our data back. And those are areas for us that's exciting. So formulations, drug delivery, and again, data.
Yeah, I guess Tom, same question to you. Is there any technology or any companies or anybody else that you're watching, observing, any trends you think are particularly interesting in the technology space in cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, not so much specific companies. I'd say from an agricultural perspective, the remote sensing work that Marcin is doing, I think, is going to be incredibly important. Again, as the scale of this industry grows by orders of magnitude, having people walk around fields is just not going to be the way forward. So having, whether that's drones or satellite technology coupled to these AI and these algorithm systems and the different software that's able to tell you your crop health, both at a plant level, but also at a land parcel level, I think is incredibly important. So I think, here in Canada, we're doing outdoor cultivation now. This is our second season for outdoor cannabis cultivation. We've been growing hemp for a number of years as well. Hemp producers can also play in the cannabis space, although they do have to keep with that 0.3% THC limit. So that's important. I think that from a cultivation perspective, the concept of a strain or variety is a crapshoot. We don't have any standardization. These names are essentially meaningless. There's no genetic heritage. There's, clonal propagation really is the only way to ensure that you have the same genetics growing by a producer, which are obviously influenced by external factors. But right now, if you grow from seeds, the seed source is unknown. There's phenotypes within the seed lot. It's just there's a lot of companies doing, like cultivation companies doing R&D on genetics, where they should just be focused on growing a well-known, very stable, very strong, robust genetics. So again, in Canada, we have nursery licenses now. So people's businesses are just finding those genetics and selling them to growers, again, mirroring what the actual agricultural industry looks like, rather than being a nursery and a cultivator. So that's extremely important from an extraction perspective. Selfishly, I'm excited what we're doing. We've had a lot of success from the IP and development and innovation phase. It's taken a long time to get here. We're getting into commercial production as we speak, so that's exciting. And ultimately, our goal is to help the Jaspreets of the world. She mentioned standardization, and cannabis itself is an extremely hard plant to study from a medical perspective, because traditionally, from a pharmaceutical perspective, pharmaceutical companies and doctors and researchers love single molecules, right? They love to control variables and to standardize them. And whereas cannabis is a plant and a substance that has hundreds of different active ingredients. And so there's really no good way to approach a medical trial unless you remove these variables. And if you have dozens of cannabinoids and terpenes all influencing the endocannabinoid system in each other, it gets very, very hard to study. So our goal is to provide other companies, whether that's pharma or cannabis, a standardized molecule, something that they can have as an input, as an API almost, to make these products, these formulations, so that there's batch to batch consistency. Because I'll be honest, when you put a crude extract, full spectrum or broad spectrum extract into something that you're trying to study from a pharmaceutical perspective, to me, broad spectrum or full spectrum simply means unrefined. It's crude. Other than testing for every single cannabinoid, you don't really know what's in there. And so really that poses a lot of issues down the road. So that's just exciting for me as this industry grows, especially here in Canada, where we have a more mature market and specialization. we can have the cultivators focusing on the correct genetics to output the correct chemistry. We can have extractors focusing on different extraction, whether that's for more recreational use, where they're products, or for more kind of pharmaceutical or medical use, where you standardize, refine, purify, and formulate. I think that's all exciting. So there's again, we're still in the early stages of this industry. We went from this kind of illicit market to now a market that's heavy on regulations. But the next thing forward is really using this big data, using what we know, and specializing in getting into that nitty gritty, and making sure that every step of the way we're making these informed decisions and using technology in order to get us to somewhere where efficiency is great, and both the consumer and the business producing it are happy with what they have.
Great. I mean, a lot to unpack there. We could maybe do another hour just on the stuff you spoke about there, but maybe Marcin, move over to you, because I'm sure you have quite a few technologies that you're watching and observing and are quite excited about. So just one or two quick ones.
And yeah, actually, I have two on my mind. That when you said who you watch and when you look for the inspiration and who is the one to follow, I would say first one would be NVIDIA and everything they do with artificial intelligence and actually providing the hardware to do the data science. What they did with COVID, what they are doing right now, the tools that they are producing to allow us to be in the world that we are and to then access the data in a manner that was never before. They are the big player, and I think that we are not realizing that some of the tech giants are playing a big role because they are delivering the tools that were never here before. And one of those to me is SpaceX, because if we're gonna have 5G everywhere and his satellites and the way he's getting the cargo out of this world means also another thing for the astronauts, because cannabis is a great plant from the perspective that you can have a multiple use, as we see with hemp. And because companies like SpaceX want to go to the outer space, they are investing, and there will be more and more research into the plants that can enable to survive, and it will also allow us to learn more about our planet and then how we map it and exactly to know what's going on, but also to learn more about the plant, because this is one of the most useful, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would like to take it to Mars, because what you'd rather have there, right?
That's for sure.
Great. Rafael, so I guess same question to you. Is there any technology or companies that you're observing which excite you? Is there anybody that you want to just shout out to wrap things up?
So maybe it's not the name of the company, but the technology that I'm very excited about is hyperspectral imaginary and 3D imaginary, because now we are preparing a project, and I'm reading a lot about that. I have engineers to do so, but I also want to be updated. But so thanks to that technology, we are able to take a plant into the computer and analyze, let's say, everything, how it could evaluate in the future, what are the abilities of this plant, how it can be developed. So we don't need to wait for the plant to get mature, to get used, and etc. We can model everything right now. We have enough data to do so. So instead of waiting for everything that will happen in the next 3 or 4 months, we can calculate that. So we can predict how it will evolve. And after a few cycles, we have a strategy what to do step by step to get to the point in the future. So everything will be much more quicker, much more precise, and there will be no waste. So you will get what you want because you calculated that. So
just quickly on that point, Rafael, you bring up the concept of waste. I think the cannabis industry has a dirty little secret that not many people acknowledge, especially indoor bunker style cultivation, in that it's one of the most energy intensive industries in the world. Okay, I'm sure some of you have read that paper published a few years ago, which calculated the cannabis, the footprint of cannabis from a carbon perspective. And based on their model and assumptions, 1 kilo of cannabis puts out 5 tons of CO2 into the air. Okay, so it's like equating smoking a joint and driving 40 kilometers in a Honda Civic. So waste and inefficiencies in this industry are extremely abhorrent, I think, and I think it's going to benefit everyone, both the consumers and the producers, if we can be more efficient in our cultivation. Because right now you have people growing inside with hot lights replacing with LEDs. That's one thing. You have air conditioners battling that heat and dehumidification, and it's just a very energy intensive industry. So anything we can do to mitigate that is going to help the planet and also help the consumer save some money.
And the funny thing you mentioned is that you have 5 tons, per 1 kilogram, but the hemp actually absorbs around 20 tons per hectare, right? So maybe the solution to the cannabis industry is to grow more hemp. We will consume the CO2 that the cannabis drug market is producing, and then we have a cycle.
Yeah, you can grow indoors and on the site outdoors to get one cycle. And in terms of efficiency, it's not only about cannabis. For example, tomato. If the site is not right, it's a waste. They are not going to sell it to the shop because no one will buy it. You want to get a beautiful, ripe tomato, and if it's bad shape, there's no point of providing it to the shop. So what they do is they just throw it away. So there's always few trucks a day in every greenhouse, tomatoes, that no one will ever eat.
This is why we started Nextleaf, because our motto is turning garbage into gold. And say what you will about refined extracts and distillate, but we're after the chemistry and not the look or the smell or whether it's sellable. So as these companies get bigger, the waste increases, and you've already spent in time and labor to produce that biomass. Might as well take those molecules out and remove them, because if not, it's going in the compost, it's going to waste, and money's lost, time's lost, and energy as well.
Yeah, but I think one of the solutions for the cannabis industry would be for the hemp industry to grow, because the more experience we have from there, we can increase the efficiency here, and the more we know about the plant and people know, it helps the industry to then build the sale. I think that one of the solutions for the cannabis industry is to grow bigger is to bring more hemp, and because this is a less controversial plant and it's easier to introduce it into society, and I think that that's something that everyone can help.
Great conclusion. So it's been a fantastic panel. Thanks to the audience. It's been another epic 11-hour day. So I really appreciate it. Amazing panelists. I'm very grateful to all of you. And I really look forward to doing a round 2.